When we are young, we are taught to revere the light. But when I turn to it, I see only fire. The fire of pain, of loss, the choices I made. Quel'Thalas, home.
It's blue!
Until the Horde threatened everything. My family was sworn to protect it. And protect it we did. When Sylvanas and I fought together, we fought as one. But the conflict here was growing, pulling my sister and I apart.
How can you leave? You would choose the Alliance over Quel'Thalas, our home.
It's not just our kingdom at risk. If the Horde isn't beaten back, others will fall. I have to go.
But you're abandoning your family.
I am doing this for our family. I lost a sister that day. Had I known that my actions would curse Sylvanas to her fate, but I have chosen differently. I left my home to fight this war to the end. I had no idea how far away that fight would take me. Yet despite the war, I found my life's true love, Turalyon. And together we fought side by side, until we became three. But beyond the boundaries of our world, our enemies grew powerful.
You can make your stand here. Why risk marching into the unknown?
Our only choice is to take the fight to them before it's too late. Should we not succeed,
I will keep him safe. Just come back.
We'll return before you know it, Eritor.
Had I known that I would not see my son again until he was a man himself, would I have still left? I had given everything for this fight. The only thing left to give was myself. There was no other way. In order to defeat the darkness, I had to embrace it. So embrace it I did. What cost? Turalyon, who had known me, loved me, fought beside me, now saw me differently.
What have you done?
The shadow, it saved us.
No. I would rather have died than see you fall to evil.
Turalyon didn't understand, but I could not fault him. If I had known that embracing the shadow would push him away, would I have sought another path? No. All of the things I did for a reason. War is sacrifice. And I have sacrificed everything to protect those I love. To keep them safe. And if it takes sacrificing myself to protect our world, I will not hesitate. I'm a soldier of Azeroth.
Not me crying throughout the whole thing. Alright, are you ready for my breakdown? Okay, so starting off, so I did this like scene by scene, but not every single scene. And I'll tell you what I skipped when I go through this. So, there's this, which is very early on. I could actually probably still have like the video up here. It's like, okay, you won't get volume from this, but it's like in this montage, right? And we don't like know for sure who that is, but I was talking to people in Discord and they were like, do you think that's her mother? Like, do you think that's Larissa? And I was like, I think it probably looks more like Larissa than it does Lyrath. So I'm assuming this is Alleria's mother. Like, I'm assuming this is Alleria's mother when they bury her. It's really interesting, passingly, that, like, Alleria's mother is shown, but not her father. But I also think it's because, if you read the Sylvanas book, Alleria and her mother have a really tense relationship. She has mommy issues. We don't need to get too deep into that, but I feel like her mother's death probably haunts her in a way more than her father's death, considering all of the sort of tension she had with her mother. This was the scene when Sylvanas found out that their parents had died. I'm not going to read this. I'm not going to read a whole page, but I'm just letting you know. Okay, moving on. Second one. I really like this one. So this is Alleria walking into the chamber with like Anasterian, and she has, it's not terribly visible. I assume that it wasn't shown because of like ratings and stuff. But she has like a troll head in her hand that she like decapitated a troll. And then this is her, like you can see the silhouette, her hanging it over them. Also, someone pointed out that this map was the Warcraft 3 map. But this scene takes place in one book. This scene takes place in Tides of Darkness, chapter 14. She walks in on Anasterian, the king, and also possibly Darkon, who is the guy that's like single-handedly responsible for opening up Silvermoon to Arthas during the Third War and causing all the elves to die. I don't know who of these two Darkon might be, because this guy sort of looks older. But I don't think Darkon at this point is, like, old. He's always done his really weirdly, like, fashionable, stylish hats. Also worth saying, and this is where timeline things get weird because of retcons, Alleria's father, Virath, was Anasterian's chief advisor, and so I had a very brief moment where I was like, oh my god, is that her father? But technically speaking, based on Sylvanas, by this time in the timeline, her parents are already dead. So I do not think this would be her father. But yes, I'll read this out briefly. In answer, Alleria swung her arm and released the object she'd been carrying since she and Verisa had run. The troll's head flew through the air, its short, dark hair waving about it, the sun catching on a tusk, and fell again, landing just before Anasterian's feet. I just really like the scene, because it's like one of the scenes in the short that's taken, like, directly from the books. Anyhow. I skipped over a lot of the, like, stills of the war at the start, because those were introduced in the promo images. And so, like, people were pointing out that Lorthamar was there and Haldoran was there. I did not include that in this thread. So, like, take that as you will. Okay. Next tweet. So, this one's... I'm not sure about this one. I thought that this was Lyrath, Alleria's younger brother, because we know that a pretty significant part of, like, Alleria, Sylvanas, and Verisa's story is that their younger brother died during, like, an orc attack on a town during the Second War. And this scene is, like, in the video. Let's fast forward a little bit. This scene is, like, her pulling, like, a burial shroud over, like, a dead elf, right? And I was like, I think that's her brother, but I wasn't sure about it for two reasons. First of all, he doesn't really look the way he's described, because here he has, like, red hair, but in the books, and this is a scene from Sylvanas where she finds Lyrath's body, he has like golden hair. And the second reason I wasn't sure is because Alleria never actually finds Lyrath's body. It's Sylvanas who finds him. And then basically, like, after this scene in the books, Sylvanas goes to Varisa and they have a conversation. Alleria isn't told until later because she's not, like, currently in Quel'Thalas. They have to get the news to her. And so I was like, either this isn't Lyrath, this is just, like, a random elf that she covered in a burial shroud, which is fine, that still makes sense. Or this is sort of like a narrative symbolic shortcut for her brother dying and the grief that comes from that, which is something that happens a lot, like, artistically speaking. I think it's significant to use it as a tool to show her grief about her brother dying. There's also something I want to say about it, but it's a little later in the thread. So we will come back to this chronologically. So there's that. So then this scene, which is like what follows next. This one with Alleria talking with Sylvanas. And this was weird to me. Not like weird, but there's a lot of other stuff in this short that comes like directly from the books. I don't think the scene is from the books. I think this scene was sort of a mishmash of things. In the Sylvanas book, there's scenes really early on where Alleria is arguing with their mother, and then Alleria decides she's going to leave Quel'Thalas as a kid. This is like well before the Second War, before all this happens. She's going to leave with like a contingent of elves and sort of go on her own way and discover the world. She never argues with Sylvanas, and I wonder if part of the inspiration for this scene, because this is also Alleria leaving, if it's sort of like a reference to that in a way, a callback that like instead of, you know, Alleria arguing with her mother about leaving, it's Alleria arguing with Sylvanas about leaving. And I said, the closest thing I could find to this in the books was from Tides of Darkness, and this is like a completely different scene. First of all, in this timeline, I shouldn't say in this timeline, but during this part of the timeline, Alleria is like already with Turalyon, and so it's not just the elves on their own. Like Alleria's already been fighting alongside Turalyon. Alleria says like Khadgar, Alleria, Sylvanas, Lorthamar Theron, and Kurgan Wildhammer. Like you have pretty much the whole sort of alliance here. But this is the closest thing I could find, because Turalyon up here, like, turns to Sylvanas and is like, "We welcome you and all your kin into our alliance. Together we will drive the horde from this continent, from your lands and ours, that we may afterward live in peace and cooperation once again." And she's sort of chill about this. I don't know if she has anything else that she even says on this page. But then, like, halfway down, Turalyon's like, "Okay, we gotta go. Like, we'll come back and help Quel'Thalas," which is what he says right here. But then figures out that the horde is moving south to attack Lordaeron. And then at the end, Alleria says, "From Lordaeron they could spread down across the rest of the continent," Alleria pointed out. "And if they left a force here, they would have 2 points of origin." So the scene that basically follows this is Alleria and Turalyon going to Lordaeron. So that's sort of like the equivalent scene that I could think of that also involves Sylvanas in the books from Tides of Darkness, is that's the scene where Alleria is like, "We gotta go." But like in the book, Sylvanas is just chill with that. The thing is, I was also looking for the equivalent version of this in the Sylvanas book, but it skips over it, because the Sylvanas book basically goes straight from Lyrath's death to like Sylvanas is now a banshee. So this exchange doesn't happen in that book either. I want to say the timeline generally is a little weird, because here's the thing. Alleria, this is where I started, where I was like, Alleria was arguing with her mother and she left. And that sort of lines up with her appearance in Tides of Darkness, where her first appearance in the book is her showing up with her contingent of elves to meet Turalyon and basically like talk with the budding alliance and stuff when the Second War breaks out. She only returns to Quel'Thalas when the war breaks out, but she returns with Turalyon, which would have happened before this scene, But the short is choosing not to include Turallion at this time. He comes in the scene after this, which I think is more a function of the flow of the video than them trying to say she meets Turallion after. But obviously, so she returns to Quel'Thalas, but then she leaves again very quickly afterward with Turallion. It's like the timeline's just a little wonky, and so when I was trying to find the equivalent of this scene, I was like, when does she come? But like, this is a hot mess. Like, it changes in each source. And I, like, later on in the thread, I'm like, okay, it's probably obvious by this point, but these books, like Tides of Darkness and Beyond the Dark Portal, they're old, they're outdated, like, this stuff has been retconned by Sylvanas and in-game things, and I don't mean this is, like, just old lore, I mean, like, these books said Lorthamar had brown eyes, like, that's how outdated they are. So we're gonna take that sort of with a grain of salt, but it's still fun to think about when it comes to breaking this video down. So Tides of Darkness came first, and this was published in 2007, so yeah. It's not like the year Burning Crusade comes out. It's actually really funny that Eretor isn't even in these books, considering. So Turallion. Realized that already by this point she's already met Turallion, but then in the short, this is at the point where she's like, I found my life's true love, Turallion. This book is the book in which you get, like, the building of their relationship, basically. And this is just a cute little snippet where he's like, she's hot. So, okay, so this is a really fun fact. This snippet is from Beyond the Dark Portal, and it's a flashback. Now, I never got all the way through this book, so I'm sort of, like, half guessing. I'm gonna read this. I'm gonna read the snippet out. I haven't read the others, but I'm gonna do this one. Turallion rubbed at his strained, tired eyes, blinking back what he insisted on thinking of tears of exhaustion. After their single night together, she'd been gone the next morning. He'd emerged from his tent to news that shocked him to the core. Alleria and her rangers, of course, had returned from their scouting mission. He learned that grey morning, his eyes widening with compassion and pain, that the Horde had cut a dreadful swath through Quel'Thalas, and that Alleria had personally lost no fewer than 18 kin of various degrees of closeness, cousins, aunts, uncles, nephews. And among the dead was her younger brother. He'd rushed to her, but when his hand closed on her shoulder, she'd wrenched away. He tried to talk to her, but she'd brushed any words aside. It was as if they had never been lovers, as if they'd never even been friends. Turallion felt something break inside him at that moment, something he'd since pushed aside and let scar over, because he was a general, he was a leader, and he could not afford to indulge his personal pain. So, like, during this scene, if this is actually Lirath, she's already been with Turallion at this point. Now, I've had brainworms about this, please indulge me. Do you think this one night they spent together is when they conceived Eretor? Because Eretor is like a few months old when they go through the Dark Portal and leave him with Verisa. And I don't know the exact timeline. I don't know how long passes between these two books. Like, I don't know. I was gonna look at Chronicle to see if it gave a year marker, because it would have had to have been like a year, pretty much, for her to carry a baby to term and then him be a few months old by the time that they leave. And what's interesting is that, like, so they have that night together, she finds out her brother has died, becomes really cold to him, and then in the beginning of this book, she and Turallion basically break up. Like, they have not even talked. Like, she hates him, he still sort of pines for her. And I didn't get far enough into the book, I have to admit, but they obviously eventually reconcile. But it's interesting thinking how this is recontextualized by if she got pregnant then, and then spent time, while pregnant, mind you, hunting down orcs on her own to kill them without Turallion. Sort of sad. But it's interesting, like, I feel like that would fit the timeline, but I don't know how much time passes. That, like, she becomes pregnant with Eretor, like, the day that she finds out. Well, she conceives Eretor the day that she finds out Lirith dies. Like, think about that. Like, the symbolism? So, this scene is not actually in this book. In this book, what she does is she goes to Verona, one of her attendants, and is like, take a message to my family. And she actually gives Verona, like, the pieces of the necklace. But Verona, fun fact, is now a void elf in Telagris. But, so, they ended up changing it actually very recently. I'm pretty sure it was in Alleria's short story that's going to be in, like, the book that's coming out, but the sort of whisper story that literally just came out, like, what, weeks ago or something? Where it says, even though Arator was a man grown, she still saw in him the wailing bundle she'd handed off to her sister Verisa when she journeyed beyond the dark portal. Like, literally, like, it's literally that scene. Which is sort of cool, because knowing that these two things were developed at the same time, they put that in the short story because I assume it had been, like, changed for this. And it was also sort of gently referenced in the 1,000 Years of War audio drama, because she said he'd been a few months old when she'd left for war. I don't think Arator is mentioned in these books. I think he was canonized for the first time in the Burning Crusade, like, in-game, and then they sort of retroactively, like, retconned this in a way. He was, like, retroactively added to the story here. And this, the recent short story that came out, is the one that lines up with the Alleria short. So this is basically almost like scene for scene what happens in the 1,000 Years of War audio drama. That's a mouthful. And I'm really glad that I did my Aerodath video recently because I'd researched it for that, and I was like, oh hell yeah, like the Easter eggs. So the video doesn't give background for this, but I'll tell you. At this point, Alleria and Turalyon are with the Army of the Light. They've been chillin' with Zira in the Nether. And Alleria gets a vision of Argus, and so she and Turalyon go on a scouting mission by themselves to Argus, and what happens is they get trapped by a whole bunch of demons. Go back to this. And let me tell you, it is not going well for them. Alleria, what this video cuts out is that Alleria had conversations with Lothraxion and Zira where she had a passing interest in the Void, because she was like, okay, yeah, we're fighting the Burning Legion right now, but if we're gonna take the fight to the Void after this, shouldn't we know more about the Void? And Lothraxion tells her about Locus-Walker, and Zira's like, you will never say the word the Void in my presence ever again. Begone, mortal. Psh. And so what happens, she develops like a passing interest in it. She's like, I need to know, to be the hunter to this prey. And so when they get to Argus and they get trapped, she taps into the Void for the first time. What's really interesting about this, that's different from the audio drama, is that she uses her Void abilities to murder a bunch of the demons. In the audio drama, she just creates a portal and then goes through the portal. Like, none of this part happens in the audio drama, but it's actually really badass. I also sort of like it being added, actually, because I feel like it adds a little bit of context to why Locus-Walker decides to teach her in the way that he does. So this is like scene for scene, this part. She takes them through a portal. They like end up literally on floating rocks in the Nether. They have the conversation in the short is a little different than the conversation in the audio drama, but the point is the same. They have this moment where she has like her little Void hand and he goes to touch her and it hurts. And this happens in the audio drama too. This also happens in Shadows Rising. Or rather, it doesn't happen in Shadows Rising, but it's because she's not actively tapping the Void. I think people were confused about that for a while. I think it's just because, like, she's actively wielding the Void. And here's the thing about Turalyon. He's not just, like, a mortal man anymore. He has been light-forged. Like, he is a being of the light now. He's not just, like, a human paladin. He's literally, like, a light creature. And so him, like, making contact with her when she's actively tapping into the Void causes pain between the both of them. And this happens in the audio drama, exactly like this. Like, it's word for word. It's so, I really like it. It's delightful. So she makes another portal and nopes out, which is sort of funny, because if you think about it, she, like, tells him that she knows the Army of the Light's gonna find him, but she's literally just like leaving him on a rock in the Nether by himself. Like, damn, girl. But yeah, that's also why he lives, like, because the whole point of the 1,000 Years of War story is that they've lived 1,000 years. He lives for that long because he's been life forged. Okay, I love this part. This is my favorite part. So, who watched my Eridath video with Alleria? Because, so this scene takes place in the present, or is about as close to it as we can get, because obviously this is when she puts on the new armor. In pre-patch stuff, she still has her old appearance. Once we see her in Dorne in The War Within, she has her new armor on. So this, I assume, is like as current as we can get. But you know what's really interesting about the location and what she's doing here? These are the corrupted Krokul that we fought on Argus doing the quests with her and Archon. So I assume she's going back to Argus. Like, I assume this is Argus, which is interesting. And these, like, corrupted Krokul are, like, summoning void creatures. And I am so obsessed with the symbolism of this part. I can't get over this. I was raving about this. There's very multi-layered symbolism here, because this is her in the present, donning this new armor, embracing her identity. But it's also the time in Legion in the past when she met up with Locus-Walker again, and he helped her truly tap into her powers with the Void and embrace her identity. And so I really love this as like a symbolic reference, because it's not just like they decided to pick a moment in her past that is a very defining moment for her and reference it as a defining moment in the present as well. And like this whole video has been a series of defining moments in her life, right? But we like skipped over the Argus stuff, so this is such a clever way, the Argus stuff other than obviously her with Terralion. So this is such a clever way to like reference that. Like if you played through the Legion stuff and you remember it, you're like, oh my god, this is like exactly what happened in those quests. It's just like everything else in the short is pretty straightforward. I feel like this is the most symbolically heavy part of it. And I feel like I'll repeat myself if I keep trying to break it down. I just really like that, like, it's a callback to that. That, like, this is, I'm gonna say it again. This moment back in Legion is when she first truly accepted her identity as someone sort of tapping into the void. This is when she consumed the heart of a void god. This is when she consumed a Dark Naru Laura. And the fact that the end of this short has her going back there and re-embracing her identity, putting on new armor. I'm just like, it's too good. Like the multi-layer references of it, I was like, this is so well done, cinematically speaking. Like the ending of this is by far my favorite part for that reason. Oh, it kills me. So this is like a red sun. I can't remember those details about Argus, but it really struck me because it's so great that I'm here. Eritor has this, like, text, right? He has this text all the way back in TBC, where he said he had a dream of a crimson skyline enveloping him. Yeah, actually, I'll just read it out. Do your dreams change? Mine do not. I have one dream. A crimson skyline envelops me as Legion, numbering beyond comprehension battle in the distance. I kneel before the body of a man, presumably my father, and weep. As he is gasping for air, his body wholly crushed, he whispers something. Despite every effort, I am unable to hear what he's trying to tell me. I was like, I hadn't remembered it, so when I first saw this and I saw the red sun, I was like, oh my god, is it Eritor's vision? Is that foreshadowing for like Terralion dying in the War Within? And then I went back to the dialogue and I was like, oh, that's not quite. So I was thinking about it a little, and I had a very brief conversation with someone where I was like, okay, he was saying he had a dream. So like hypothetically speaking, it probably wasn't even foreshadowing or like a prophetic vision. It could have been a dream, could have not been prophetic, but it also could have already happened because he said that he just assumed it was his father, but maybe it wasn't. Like, the whole Legion thing sort of came and went. So at this point I'm like, I I don't know if we'll get Erator's vision, but it would be really funny if, you know, it did happen. Just saying. This is so cool. The end. To Logris. Maybe. Presumably. Sort of feels like it. Anywho. That is my very lengthy cinematic breakdown.